A lot of things have to come together in order for a production to be completed. Various people with different backgrounds contribute a variety of ideas and concepts. A remarkable amount of work has to be done to finish a number of important jobs. As the project wraps up, post-production operations ensure that everything comes out looking as nice as possible. This long process applies to game design as well. Artists, animators, programmers, musicians, voice actors, and plenty of others all help to realize a new creative idea. This experience can potentially dazzle players and viewers alike with countless hours of content. In some cases, you may even find yourself getting emotionally attached to certain characters or scenarios. With this connection established, you might wish for additional content to enjoy in the same universe. Let's say an anime adaptation gets announced a little while after the game's release. This news gets you excited, and you eagerly await this new project. The show finally comes out, but you notice that it's only 4 episodes long. With the game being a long journey that you love, is there any hope that this short series will be a success? Welcome to Corpse Party: Tortured Souls. Corpse Party is a series of indie horror games that initially started back in 1996 in Japan. It wouldn't be until about 2012 that overseas players would be graced with a much more polished remake, also serving as their introduction to the series. Odds are you saw a number of early YouTubers playing this, giving the game a nice boost in exposure. The series would continue on with many sequels, manga series, and live-action adaptations. Unfortunately, the state of the series seems to be up in the air. After the initial release of the first game, things continued on a downward slope, ending with an episodic sequel that hasn't gotten a new chapter in about 2 years. That aside, we'll be talking about the best part of the series, Blood-Covered, or Blood-Covered Repeated Fear if you prefer. Despite being an indie game from a small team, this is a complete horror package that really delivers. The atmosphere is great, the story is interesting, and the character art is pretty decent, though this depends on the version you play. The game especially shines in 2 specific areas. First, the sound design is excellent. There are plenty of horror games that feel flat due to weak audio. In Corpse Party, they have some pretty satisfying effects, enhanced by an absolutely stellar soundtrack. While the voice acting quality also differs between versions, the PSP port has some exceptional performances. When these guys are scared, hurt, or losing their minds, you definitely feel it. Throw all that together, and your horror audio experience is perfectly on point. The second major strength lies within the subtleties. The surroundings are established nicely, tension is built effectively, and characters react properly. All of this has a chance to sink in the more you explore, until the dread of what you're dealing with fully latches on. Adding to the subtlety of the game is the overall presentation. Instead of hyper-realistic scenes of violence, everything plays out using only text and crude pixel art, with some exceptions. While that seems like a detriment, it's actually the opposite. A big part of horror plays on fear of the unknown. There's a good chance that while playing, you'll make a poor decision or do things in the wrong order. This triggers wrong ends, signature scenes that spell out bloody deaths for the main cast. A good chunk of these happen with only a black screen and some dialogue. Add the top-notch audio in, and your imagination fuels the rest. When you have limitations, your brain usually fills in the gaps with something much worse. Using only gruesome audio, some of these scenes can be terrifying. Not to mention, you won't find a single jump scare here, making it the best kind of horror. While some of these elements get transferred to the anime, it's interesting seeing the liberties that get taken due to their own limitations. Before we get to that, in order to provide some story context for the rest of the discussion, I'll be doing a condensed retelling of the game's plot. If you'd prefer to skip this, feel free to use the provided timestamps. A group of high school students are staying late in class one night, spending their last bit of time together before a certain girl moves away. Joined by their teacher and another character's little sister, they all perform a certain charm ritual that will supposedly let them stay friends forever. After completing the steps, something goes wrong, and they get forcibly thrust into another dimension. Very unfortunately for them, it's an infamous school where a lot of grisly murders took place previously. Not only that, but a group of apparitions roam the building, mindlessly killing anything they come across. Various spirits of other deceased students tell them how they're all separated into different planes of existence in this bizarre nexus. It's unlikely they'll come across each other while here, but the students press on regardless. The first pairing is made up of Naomi, a more conservative girl, and Seiko, who's a lot more outgoing and expressive. After a bit of exploring, the girls briefly part ways, resulting in Naomi getting attacked by a strange mist. Managing to escape, she lashes out at the previously absent Seiko, causing them to split again and search for clues independently. Naomi knows she needs to apologize, searching different areas to locate her missing friend. This leads her to the upstairs bathroom, where she hears a strange sound coming from the stalls. Opening the door, she sees Seiko attempting to hang herself. Naomi panics and does everything she can to help, but the attempts at saving her fall short, leaving one less living student in the haunted school. The next chapter focuses on the second group. Miss Yui is the capable and caring teacher, Shinozaki is the horror-loving but easily scared class representative, and Yoshiki is the sarcastic delinquent with a good heart. Miss Yui attempts to search around the area, but gets incapacitated by an angry spirit. The other two look around soon after, Shinozaki falling prey to possession on a few occasions. Working past that, they manage to locate Mayu, another student, talking to some very dangerous new friends. They leave to come up with a plan to save her, running into the ghost of another girl, Naho. Shinozaki recognizes her as a famous occult researcher, revealing that her last blog post was about the charm that landed them in the school. Naho suggests that the ghost can be put to rest by hearing an apology from their killer, and later the duo comes across a doll that appears to be doing just that. They let the ghosts hear this confession, but rather than soothe them, it causes them to become enraged. The spirits rush down the hall with Mayu, splattering her against the wall. Chapter 3 opens on the scared but determined Satoshi and his more worried little sister, Yuka. Most of their time is spent exploring the school while attempting to find a functioning bathroom for Yuka to use. They come across Morishige, a more quiet and reserved guy, who seems to be taking photos of a certain bloody mess. They exchange information and quickly part ways to resume searching. Eventually, the duo comes across a new wing of the building, though this area seems even more dangerous. After exploring the surroundings and not having any luck with another bathroom, Satoshi suggests that Yuka head back outside to do what she needs to do. Taking him up on the offer, she immediately runs into danger, quickly heading back in. She's met with the worst-case scenario, as Satoshi is no longer there, supposedly shifted to another dimensional plane by the whims of the cursed school. This leaves Yuka alone to wander the building, hoping to find her missing brother. After another strange encounter with Morishige, Yuka runs into a student from another school, named Kizami. Coming across as very capable, he offers to let her join him as he searches for his own little sister. After finally finding what appears to be a decent bathroom, Yuka leaves for a bit as Kizami reunites with a fellow classmate. This doesn't last long, as Kizami stabs the guy, then kicks him through a gap in the floor. The strong and capable high schooler has revealed himself to be a bit of a psychopath, leaving Yuka in a very precarious situation. The scene shifts to Satoshi waking up in an unfamiliar location. He stumbles across a report of a certain teacher, prime suspect in the murder case of the spirits in the school. It also notes a certain young girl that survived the ordeal, confusing Satoshi, as he's seen her wandering around here as well. Naho appears before him, revealing how they all arrived at the school because one of the students messed up the charm ritual. After a bit of dialogue, Naho begins to chant, warping Satoshi elsewhere. The penultimate chapter begins with the former Mayu seeing the ghost children, making the very unwise decision to follow them into the next room. Shifting over to Satoshi, he finds himself back in a familiar part of the school. Wandering for a bit, he hears voices coming from the girls' bathroom. Listening to some odd dialogue eventually leads him to interjecting, but no one answers, and he isn't able to open any of the stalls. He begins to leave, but another odd sound catches his attention. Kicking in one of the doors, he finds Naomi now trying to hang herself where Seiko did. Through some quick thinking, he manages to barely save her. She's glad to have him there with her, but strangely doesn't remember committing the recent deadly act. The two of them continue to search for Yuka, learning a little more about the killer in the process. We move over to Shinozaki, left alone by an injured teacher and a recently ambushed Yoshiki. He manages to escape and reunite with Shinozaki, who's currently gathering more info from Naho. She alludes that the doll they found earlier can help them find the killer's remains, which could potentially help them further. Instead of remains, they end up finding severed tongues belonging to the young spirits. The doll cries out to return them, and with each risky encounter, the kids finally get appeased. Freeing the third child miraculously lands the two back at their original school. They're overjoyed at this revelation, until one of the spirits shows up in front of them. It turns out that she's the one who managed to send them back, as her mind has returned to its former sane state. This won't last, as the Nexus has swallowed too many innocent souls at this point. The pain and suffering is so great that it's now beginning to feed on the minds of the children bound there. They're then told that the only way to get the rest of the students out is to go back in and properly appease everyone. A big piece of the puzzle is still missing, and in order to bring it to light, Shinozaki goes into the spirit girl's locked away memories. There, she becomes one of the original victims of the school killings. Blindfolded and tied up, the fierce screams of the nearby kids fill the stagnant air. One by one, the killer moves down the line, systematically brutalizing each child, until they reach Shinozaki. Her blindfold gets slowly removed, revealing the true killer to be the one young survivor, Sachiko. She then has no choice but to experience her own special brand of hell. The final chapter opens on Kizami showing his true colors to Yuka. Parting ways, she comes across the friend that was kicked from above, barely hanging on. Kizami promptly finishes him off, then heads over to kill Yuka next. She manages to escape with a little help from Sachiko, and the would-be killer takes out the pursuer. Morishige gets his last scene, looking at his gory photo collection to keep himself sane, as odd as that sounds. Admiring the splattered mess on the wall from before, he hears Mayu's spirit tell him to stop looking at her insides. Recognizing the voice of the one he's been searching for the whole time, Morishige snaps. What little sanity was left is now utterly destroyed. Shifting back to Shinozaki, the torture has finally ended. She comes back to reality, still very much disturbed from the flashback she was forced to endure. Eventually calming down, she relays the new identity of the real killer to Yoshiki. Despite the slim odds of success, the two steel themselves and head back to the deadly Nexus to save their friends. Upon returning, they stumble on Naomi's student ID, containing her ever-important charm piece. The two groups manage to meet up shortly after and catch up with everything that's happened. It's decided that Shinozaki's group will look for a way to make Sachiko atone for what she's done. Meanwhile, Satoshi's group will attempt to discover a certain way out mentioned on a research videotape they came across earlier. Yuka briefly attempts to talk with Sachiko, but it quickly goes south, causing her to run. Satoshi and Naomi scour the second wing of the school for clues, coming across Morishige's cell phone. A lone video is left on it, showing him losing his mind and jumping out of a high window. The two press on, and after circling back to the entrance, they happen upon Yuka hiding as best she can. She notices a tape nearby, which is exactly the info they need to escape. While this is going on, Shinozaki is gathering information from notes left by Naho, as well as writings from her mentor. It's within these pages that she discovers some very important articles. She learns about the curse of the school, known as darkening, and how it eats away at a person's soul when they lose all hope. A more noteworthy find states that by doing the charm ritual in reverse with the right conditions, they can appease the angered Sachiko. This is great news, but something else catches her eye. The actual steps for performing the charm ritual don't line up with the original steps she initially read about. Naho, being the one who posted the instructions in the first place, wanted the ritual to fail right out the gate. She was willing to do anything to please her mentor, including luring kids here for research purposes. Shinozaki shocks her with the fact that she herself succumbed to the darkening, and after losing her mind briefly, killed the mentor that she loved. Unable to fathom this truth, Naho's spirit breaks down, leaving the two alone in the room. The groups reconvene, and thanks to Shinozaki and Yoshiki's previous efforts with appeasing the child's spirits, the way out is looking more attainable. While exploring a little more, Shinozaki gets locked in a room by herself. Attempting to get out, Miss Yui makes a surprise appearance from the other side. This reunion is cut short when the entire floor opens up on them. With the last of her strength, Miss Yui lets Shinozaki climb up her body to safety, falling to her death soon after. The two fall down a hidden shaft, leading straight to an underground chamber. The other group encounters the ghost of Sachiko's mom, snagging her diary and learning the rest of the mystery. The principal begins sexually assaulting her, but when she tried to get away, he pushed her down the nearby stairs. Sachiko witnessed this, resulting in the principal killing her too. After cutting her tongue out and burying her in the school's basement for 20 years, she eventually regained a corporeal form. Using the principal's son, whose mental stability had deteriorated, she killed many kids to send their souls to her deceased mother. After the infamous killing she was involved in, she simply faded away from the living world. The group now knows the full story. They head to the principal's office, where they find Sachiko's severed tongue, as well as a path leading underground. Looking around a bit, they come across another gruesome area, but are forced to hide as someone approaches. Turns out the possessed teacher is still roaming around, with Seiko's corpse in tow. Naomi chases after them, leaving the siblings behind. Wandering around a little more brings the two remaining groups together, and they head towards their end goal. The young girl spirit confronts them before going to Sachiko, saying how Naomi has to fight her own demons if she wants a chance at heading home. During her chase, Naomi comes across a strange TV set, revealing something that destroys her. Back when her and Seiko split up, she had apparently succumbed briefly to the darkening. It wasn't Seiko that hung herself. Naomi committed the act without even realizing. The darkening comes back stronger than ever, almost bringing her to the point of no return. Things look hopeless, but her phone suddenly gets a text from Seiko. Earlier, Satoshi showed Naomi an unsent text on Seiko's phone that was a friendly apology. The text continues to send and resend itself multiple times, alluding that Seiko's spirit is urging her not to give up on life. In the final chamber, all of the crucial items are returned, and everyone manages to correctly perform the Sachiko charm's reversal. Naomi joins them again after the deed is done, bringing everything to a close. They vacate the premises, heading to the outside walkway to finally warp out of the Nexus once and for all. The trip back is successful, though a strange after effect happens the next day. No one at the school remembers any of the people that died at Heavenly Host. They're nothing but memories now, resulting in a bittersweet finale. Now that we have our original story established, let's move on to the next feature. Corpse Party Tortured Souls is the anime adaptation of the PSP remake, coming out 3 years after the initial Japanese release. With a mere 4 episodes, the runtime of the series comes out to roughly 2 hours total. This isn't a lot to work with, especially given the nature of the game and the events that take place. After rewatching the show, it seems like the studio that worked on it really tried to make the most of the space they had. Liberties are naturally taken to make it all work, succeeding in some areas and falling short in others. The biggest change here is the overall presentation. The anime has taken a 180 in regards to the subtleties the game has. The episodes have no time for proper build-up, preferring instead to go hard and fast in the gore department. Rather than simply reading and picturing things for yourself, the show gives the opportunity to see the violence from a more realistic perspective. If you thought the game didn't have enough in this department, the anime might just be your cup of Mountain Dew. The other main change to look out for is the plot progression. In order for a decent story to be possible, various events are streamlined and occasionally rearranged to fit the overall narrative. Again, this works in some places, but you'll see where it doesn't as we go through the episodes. Characters don't get much development here, and backstory segments are noticeably cut. The series relies heavily on your previous knowledge of the students, but given the horror aspect, I wouldn't call this a deal breaker by any means. You'll also notice a lot of little changes to regular scenes if you're very familiar with the game. One example of this is Naomi being trapped in the infirmary. In the original, you use alcohol and matches to burn hair that is wrapped tightly around the exit door. The anime simply has her rip it off with her bare hands. There are plenty of things like this, but I'm mostly going to stick to some of the major changes while discussing everything. So, how exactly does everything compare? The starting episode opens on some nice looking scenery shots of the sinister school, until we get to the first appearance of Naomi. Finding her student ID and paper scrap, she recalls the previous events that led up to this point. Here we get a flashback showing a more dynamic view of the very first game scene, with the students staying late in their classroom. With everyone present, they perform the charm ritual so that everyone can stay friends in the future. Paper doll in hand, everyone rips off their own piece, sealing their fate before they know it. After an earthquake rocks the place briefly, we're treated to a more interesting warp scene, with the entire floor shattering around them. Once again, it's time to escape from the cursed school these teens have sent themselves to. In regards to the opening song that was chosen, I think it fits pretty well. It gives me slight Another vibes as far as music and visuals go, and the little nods to extra scenes are a nice touch. Coming back from that, the two girls wake up and gather themselves before checking their surroundings. From this point, everything matches the game's events pretty closely. They check the same locations, have the same fight, and Seiko is unfortunately lost after Naomi finds her in the upstairs bathroom. As far as this episode is concerned, so far so good. However, there are some trends you'll see that carry over into the rest of the episodes. First, the pacing is quite a bit faster. Obviously, there can't be many shots of the students wandering around with the time restrictions in place. The production team attempts to waste as few shots as possible here. After the girls talk for a bit in the classroom, they jump out to the hallway. Walking for a bit, they land at the bottom of the first floor, then after some brief dialogue, snap to the upstairs bathroom. A lot of locations are visited like this, which can come across as jarring. The use of establishing shots helps to alleviate this somewhat. Before directly cutting back to the characters, the frame will settle on a set piece, such as a sign or a group of objects. This gives a bit of adjustment time to get used to the new area. Even if we don't see them walk there, the blanks get filled in, and the extra fluff gets taken out. Another noteworthy addition is the frequent use of Sachiko. Initially, the characters don't see much of her at all besides brief glimpses as she passes by. She finally starts to show herself more near the end, after it's revealed that she's the real killer. In the anime, she shows up right away, messing with some characters and directly interacting with others. Moving the plot forward quickly means that she has to play a more aggressive antagonistic role. One last thing worth noting might not be very noticeable, but if you like film, you may notice a lot of Dutch angles being used. For those not familiar, Dutch angles, or Dutch tilts, are specific camera shots that shift the viewpoint and are not completely horizontal. They're used to really emphasize tense or psychological moments. The anime has a lot of scenes that start in this view, more that shift into it, and others that come out of it. They seem to get a lot of use here, to the point of potentially getting on some people's nerves. Take this point with a grain of salt. I'm not a film major or anything, I just thought it was kind of interesting. Jumping into the next episode, we're immediately greeted with our first real taste of gory scenes. A number of unrelated students are mutilated in different ways, and this is where the series explains the nature of the darkening, though here it's referred to as corruption. After Naho appears before Naomi for a bit, we jump over to Satoshi and Yuka. We get a bit of info regarding the missing children case, ending with Yuka needing a bathroom. They run into Morishige taking his pictures of the wall splatter, then split up to explore on their own. Shinozaki and Yoshiki get attacked by one of the child's spirits, who vanishes right as Naho appears before them. She tells them about the way out, as well as the overlapping dimensional planes separating everyone. She vanishes soon after, leaving them the murderer's doll. Moving over to Mayu's location, this time, Miss Yui is the one to find her with the ghost children. She promptly gets smashed in front of her, and the possessed teacher knocks her out. We then see Morishige looking at his gore pics to stay quote-unquote sane. Mayu's spirit tells him not to look at her recently deceased mess of a body, driving him mad. Back on Satoshi and Yuka's end, Sachiko talks with and leads them out to the second wing of the school. Yuka decides to use the bathroom with Sachiko outside, so Satoshi goes into the other wing to wait for them. The situation quickly turns bad as a spirit attacks Yuka and Satoshi gets locked inside the building by Sachiko. Meanwhile, Shinozaki and Yoshiki continue on their way with the recently acquired doll in tow. It starts to talk, freaking out Yoshiki, who breaks down a weak wall as he backs up. It's through this that they discover a bag with a severed tongue. The ghost boy returns, and Shinozaki barely manages to return it to him while being choked out. A quick shot shows that two other tongues have since been gathered, but talk about Sachiko gives them the sense that they're missing something. Elsewhere, Yuka hears a nearby noise and wonders if her brother is close. We instead see Morishige amidst a group of corpses, slightly covered in blood. Yuka denies his offer to look around together, so he violently charges after her, crowbar in hand. She finds a good hiding place for herself, and while Morishige doesn't find her, Kizami does. They go off together for a bit, but get quickly discovered by the former pursuer. Yuka asks Kizami for help, so he charges in with a knife and brutally stabs Morishige in the neck. Things are alright now, since Yuka's new big brother is there to protect her. This second episode shows the first major instance of grabbing scenes to repurpose for connecting new story threads. Shinozaki and Yoshiki originally find the killer's doll, then with a very small push from Naho, solve some puzzles that lead to the recovery of the tongues. We see it all happen, and the info is all gathered by them. The anime has no choice but to take a lot of shortcuts. Naho tells them exactly what they need to do, leaves them the doll, and wraps up with a single shot alluding that they found the remaining tongues. I didn't even catch this until going back through the footage, because it happened so quickly. Not to mention the absolutely miraculous way they conveniently find the first tongue amidst the broken rubble. It's sloppy, but it works, I suppose. There's also some relatively important lore that gets brushed aside. The game drives it in that catching a spirit's gaze will leave you frozen and unable to act, basically dooming you to death. Shinozaki does make a brief note of this during their first encounter with the boy's spirit, but it ultimately amounts to nothing. The appearance of Sachiko during Satoshi and Yuka's scenes is an interesting change-up. She hides her true motives, so it's not unreasonable that the siblings would accept a lost young girl's advice. All these changes aside, I actually really love what they did with Morishige and Kizami here. Instead of his insanity simply leading him out a window, Morishige actually interacts with some of the characters now. Granted, his insanity doesn't trigger until the very end of the game, but it still works well as an earlier development. Kizami's transformation, however, might just be my favorite change in the anime. The game stretches his true reveal out over the course of 3 chapters, providing a nice sense of build-up to the eventual reveal. The anime does the complete opposite. Kizami barely has the chance to hide his intentions before Morishige forces his hand. He immediately goes for the kill shot, and it's through this that Kizami finds his new little sister. Overall, the episode is a little rough, but we're still doing alright on the whole. Episode 3 picks up where the last left off, with Kizami standing over the formerly living Morishige. Right as he's about to come after Yuka, the Nexus begins to shake, disrupting everyone at the school. Satoshi manages to find an important note, as well as a videotape, stating how they might be just what they need for heading home. Over on Yuka's end, Kizami is hot on her trail, but gets taken out by the possessed teacher before he can do anything. Coming back to Satoshi again, Naho appears, mentioning how the charm was messed up by someone, landing them all here. She warps them elsewhere, remarking how it might be too late to save anyone else. We then cut to Yoshiki and Shinozaki, who have managed to return back to their old classroom. The young girl spirit cuts their celebration short, appearing while talking about some past events. They wonder why she hasn't passed on yet despite having her belongings returned, and apparently, the repentance wasn't right. She also isn't able to bring the other students, as the window for leaving was extremely short. They find out they have to go back if they want to save their friends, but to gain a missing piece of info, Shinozaki is thrust into the spirit's memory. It's here that she becomes present for the original killings of the children. As the kids are tortured one at a time, she finally discovers that Sachiko is the true killer. Unfortunately, this info comes at a brutal price, forcing her to take on the pain of the girl she replaced. Snapping back to the present, she reveals the new info, wanting to go back to save the others. Unlike the game's events, Yoshiki instead declines the return trip, stating just how dangerous it is. She calls him heartless among other things, but Yoshiki fires back on her, saying she only wants to go back to save Satoshi. The fight continues on until Shinozaki requests to be returned to the school alone. Elsewhere, Satoshi discovers Naomi in a nearby classroom, later learning about the unfortunate death of Seiko. Sachiko, who helped Yuka get away from Kizami earlier, is now looking to kill her personally. Yuka runs off to the science room, where a new grotesque version of Kizami is waiting for her. She gets tied up shortly after, and without hesitation, the high schooler begins to sadistically carve into her. The 3 remaining students hear her screams and rush to find her at the source. Yoshiki suddenly appears to save her from the psycho, but it's already far too late for her. The possessed teacher attacks Yoshiki, who holds him off while Shinozaki gets Yuka out. His body gets torn to shreds by the attacker, but the rest manage to escape. Outside, Satoshi hugs his dying sister close, until she finally passes on. The last shot ends on Sachiko waiting for her visitors deep underground. Okay, first of all, I'm not really sure what the deal is with Kizami becoming the anatomical model. I thought maybe I forgot something, but looking back at other endings just shows him tormenting Yuka as himself. I also checked the wiki to make sure. Hey there, Lexa from the future here. So while editing this video, I took another look at the wiki, and it turns out that he is actually the anatomical model. His body just got skinned off, and that's how he is. Jesus Christ, man, this fucking series. It is kind of interesting that Kizami actually goes through with the torture, since the game scene has him come close, then get killed off by the possessed teacher. No one finds Yuka after that, and Satoshi only ever receives the photo of her corpse until a certain wrong end we'll get into later. Aside from that, there are some very interesting changes that have been made here. With this episode, Satoshi manages to find Naomi without much issue after he gets warped back. In the game, she also attempts to hang herself. It's a rough scene to go through, and also alluded to by Naho mentioning how Satoshi might be too late when he arrives. The tension is unfortunately dropped with the simple reunion, and I wish they stuck to the original on this. Something else that's very noticeable is the infamous torture scene flashback. The game has you experience a lot of this with a black screen and text, sprinkling in some additional audio and visuals here and there. In the anime, we see and hear a lot more of what's going on. It's an entirely different experience worrying about what you're going to see rather than what you're going to hear. Regardless of the version, both scenes are pretty intense. The last interesting thing is how the anime decides to follow one of the more prominent wrong ends from the game. Ordinarily, Yoshiki decides to go back to the school with Shinozaki, but this time, he flat out refuses. Honestly, it's not an unreasonable choice given the circumstances, as well as the hell they all went through. He's not a hopeless case though, as he starts feeling guilty immediately after, asking the spirit to let him go back. As for him appearing in the science room later, bookmark that, because we'll get more into that after this last episode. Following a brief scene of Naho killing her former mentor, we open on the remaining 3 students in the janitor's room. Shinozaki goes over all past and new information, including what still needs to be done and how to accomplish that. They explore the school for additional info, still missing a few crucial details. Satoshi and Naomi discover a strange new room, eventually coming across the diary that formerly belonged to Sachiko's mother. Shinozaki confronts Naho about the false information she spread about the charm ritual, leading to condescending remarks from the accused. After it's revealed that she, in fact, killed her mentor, Naho succumbs to the curse, her spirit dissolving right in front of Shinozaki. Satoshi and Naomi learn about Sachiko killing a number of kids to send to her mom, and Shinozaki finds out about the mother's cause of death. She comes across Sachiko, deciding to follow her, and the other 2 go to the headmaster's office. On the way, they witness his continued suicide attempt, jumping from the top of the building multiple times as part of his curse. Entering his room, they witness the crazy amount of protective seals coating the walls. After opening the desk and picking up a pair of scissors, Satoshi's mind gets filled with the previous memories of the headmaster. Here we see him with the late Sachiko, losing his mind and convincing himself that she's not actually dead. He cuts out her tongue to keep her from talking, vowing to kill her again if she continues to torment him. Snapping out of the vision, Satoshi relays to Naomi what he just witnessed. Some formerly stuck diary pages have now come undone, revealing the principal's sexual assault. Exploring a hidden pathway she found, Shinozaki manages to run into Miss Yui after being separated for so long. They have an extremely brief conversation, cut off by another earthquake. Some debris gets shaken loose, one particular object instantly decapitating Miss Yui. Finding their way underground, Satoshi and Naomi come across another gruesome room. Approaching footsteps prompt them to hide, and we see the possessed teacher make an appearance with Seiko's body. After cutting her tongue out, he drags her away down a corridor, causing Naomi to make a mad dash after them. Rather than her friend, she finds something strange hiding in a back room. Having fallen underground after the earthquake, Shinozaki manages to join back up with Satoshi. The young girl spirit reappears, telling them to go to Sachiko with the limited time they have left. Satoshi inquires about Naomi, but gets told that if she wants to rejoin them in the real world, she'll have to overcome her current demons. Satoshi and Shinozaki head to Sachiko's burial site to begin the ritual, but get intercepted by her vengeful spirit. Right as Naomi is about to give up on herself, Seiko's text message gets sent multiple times in an attempt to convince her otherwise. Naomi reconciles with Seiko, pushing the corruption away and ultimately saving herself. She makes it back to the others in time to witness the ongoing struggle with Sachiko. Satoshi manages to get a reaction once they mention knowing the truth about her and her mother's death. We see a flashback to the event, with Sachiko's mother already dead as the principal stands over her body. He notices Sachiko nearby, quickly silencing her before she can do anything. The students are ready to finish things off once and for all, returning the specific items to properly appease the young spirit. Her humanity gets restored, allowing her to finally move on from Heavenly Host. The teens rush back outside, ready to perform the ritual to go home. Naomi was unable to find her paper scrap, so Satoshi gives his to her, using Yuka's scrap for himself. They perform the final chant, and after living through this insane nightmare, it's finally over. After arriving home, though, something is noticeably off. While they did manage to make it back together, it seems that someone is missing a few pieces. The series ends with an epilogue scene of Naomi's mother on the phone with a doctor. Apparently, her daughter won't leave her room, only wanting to talk about her so-called imaginary friend. She may have escaped from the cursed school, but her current reality may just be more terrifying. Besides the overall streamlining of plot developments, this episode honestly works fairly well. We get just enough information to carry us to the end, though it does get presented rather quickly. I do kinda like the more emotional Sachiko moments, since the original was a relatively fast process. I don't like how Miss Yui was treated in the series overall. While the game doesn't exactly give her a ton of scenes either, we still get to see how much she cared for her students. She doesn't back down from vengeful spirits, she pushes through lots of pain to continue searching for them, and even saves Shinozaki from dying during the final chapter. You even get a nice flashback featuring some of her early teaching days, though this is unfortunately right after saving Shinozaki during a different route. The anime has her interact with Mayu, get supposedly knocked out, suddenly reappear again, then get her head sliced to cap things off. She's a pretty decent character, and it's a shame there wasn't more time to establish that. I will say though, I really loved how they ended things here. Satoshi only coming back with his arms is such an ominous note to finish on, and it even makes sense as to how it could happen. The game has the entire ritual take place where Sachiko is buried. They return the items, then immediately say the special phrase together to end it all. It's only then do they vacate the school and head outside to finally warp back. The anime only has the characters return the items, opting to incorrectly finish the ritual outside. Not only that, but Satoshi says a foreboding line to Naomi about not knowing the consequences of using a different paper scrap. Because he willingly trades his own piece, that could have been the catalyst resulting in his demise. There's another possibility implied as we see a quick shot of Kizumi's student ID. If Satoshi lied about using Yuka's paper scrap and instead grabbed Kizumi's, his body may have been warped back to the wrong school. As its own wrong end, it's really interesting breaking down how they decidedly screwed themselves. And speaking of wrong ends, it would have been really fascinating seeing the original wrong end that was foreshadowed. If you choose for Yoshiki to not go back to Heavenly Host, you immediately lose, but the game doesn't tell you this. Instead, the chapter plays out like normal, slowly making things worse and worse. The first encounter with Satoshi and Naomi goes decently enough, but it's during the second meetup that their relations completely break down. Ordinarily, Shinozaki will return Naomi's paper scrap without any issue. The B-side of this encounter has Shinozaki demanding that Naomi beg for her scrap if she wants it back. Being dumbfounded at this development, Naomi isn't sure how to react, incurring more of her classmates' wrath. She's forced to watch as Shinozaki burns the paper in front of her. Being alone in the school for too long has transformed her into a selfish sadist. Shinozaki is still very much willing to take Satoshi back with her, which means Yoshiki's earlier accusation was on the mark, at least in this instance. Speaking of Yoshiki, it's during this route that Shinozaki finally runs into him again later on. but he's already succumbed to the darkening. Whatever happened when the girl spirit brought him back doomed him from the start. With this in mind, there's no way he would have been able to save anyone, let alone meet back up with the group in the anime. Satoshi sees the image of Yuka's corpse, and later gets presented with the body to cement the proof. He begins to lose his will to live, but before seeing what happens, we see Shinozaki and Naomi meet again in the underground. Having lost her paper scrap earlier, Shinozaki beats Naomi to death and steals the one she got from Satoshi. She's quite satisfied with herself, clearly losing her mind at this point. Running off to be with her would-be lover, the plan is quickly shattered seeing that he's lost himself to the darkening. Without another person to perform the ritual with, she's effectively trapped in Heavenly Host. A vengeful smile rests on Naomi's lips as Shinozaki's fate is now sealed. Obviously that's a lot to try and fit into the final 2 episodes, but it's still fun to think about. So there you have it, a full breakdown and comparison of Tortured Souls. It feels like the team that worked on this did their best to accommodate a lot of different scenes and story elements where they could. Only having 4 episodes to work with is quite a detriment, but as a supplementary piece to the main game, it works quite well. Fans can certainly appreciate the effort and change in visuals, but newcomers will definitely be feeling a sense of whiplash, so to speak. The pace is breakneck, and certain scenes have no choice but to be rearranged to form a more coherent narrative. Only the bare essentials are included in this adaptation, resulting in a lighter story, as well as minimal character development. If they had even one more episode, there may have been just enough room to space things out better. Regardless, if what's presented here manages to pique even a little interest, the game itself might just gain some new fans. Not only that, but return trips to the anime may even be met with more enthusiasm. And hey, it's nice that we managed to get an adaptation that ended up being half decent. While it's unfortunate that it couldn't be more complete, these are simply the challenges that come with condensing horror. Hey there, if you made it to the end, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to show support for the series, both the anime and game are available to buy, though I'm not quite sure on the PSP version. The other games are also openly available, but I'd say to use your discretion on whether or not to go deeper into the rest of the series. Either way, hope you have a great day and a great Halloween, and I'll see you next time. Peace, guys.